How's the conference been for you?
It's been awesome. And I think one of the great things about this particular conference is it really is a meeting of like-minded people. And they're all people that, are progressive, open to innovation, and fundamentally, I believe, have their clients' best interests at heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so given that those are very aligned values with my business, it's been like being surrounded with a whole bunch of friends, old and new, really. Yeah.
You gave a really interesting talk yesterday. Tell us all about you.
About me. So I call myself an applied behavioral scientist. I think until I get a PhD, I'm not really allowed to call myself a proper behavioral scientist. But what that means is I have a master's in the area, and I use that knowledge to help, particularly these days, I help professional services like financial advice firms, legal firms, design client experiences that are actually, I suppose, a little bit more brain friendly. That's the sort of the technical side of what I do. But my core platform is one called 𝘁𝗸𝘆𝘀, which started as part of my studies, which is really about helping people plan for the gaps that are left between the wills and the financial plan. So that's what I do these days.
So, tell me more about that.
Right. So 𝘁𝗁𝗲 began its life. It's probably the easiest way to describe it is in how it began for me. And so when I lost my dad in 2020, I come from a background in branding, client experience design, primarily in financial services. And when he died, we knew he was sick, so he had a lot of time to help plan for that. And he left us a letter called A Letter from Your Dead Husband. And it had 70 pages of all the information that he, as a lawyer, knew we would need, but that wasn't sitting anywhere in the financial plan and wasn't sitting anywhere in the will. But within that was one oversight, which was a single bill that he didn't know he was paying. It took us 9 months to shut and 9 months to kind of get the money back and all of that nonsense. And so I decided no family should ever have to deal with that ever again. No. So the initial version of 𝘁𝗁𝗲, and that's why it's called 𝘁𝗁𝗲, was a will for your bills. So I knew about open banking, which is basically the sort of way to securely connect to your bank accounts. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could have an app where you could connect to your banks, you connect all your bank accounts, we'd go find all of your bills and subscriptions so you didn't lose one. And then in the case of death or incapacity, wouldn't it be great if a business just dealt with that for you? So that's what we built. And that was in August of 2024 that we launched that. And then what I quickly realized was that I'd built the business around the one oversight, but there were 70 pages of foresight. And then I began asking the question, who was giving families the advice on what they should be giving, including in that? And there are a selection of books called, Oh Shit, You're Dead book and that kind of thing. But there was no satisfying digital solution that I saw that incorporated live financial information like open banking to do that. So I said, if bills and bank accounts are 2 modules on the platform now, we now have over 20 modules of things that families really do need to at least think about, even if they don't wish to record instructions. Everything, so from where your passwords are stored to the key digital accounts that people should be considering, to a letter of care for your young kids, because if the plane goes down and both parents are there, who's collected the kids' allergies and interests and aspiration? And so we start with the sort of the core financial piece, assets, liabilities, bank accounts. And then we move to the practical piece, which is all of the bills and passwords and digital accounts. And then we move to the personal stuff. So your letters of care, funeral plan, pet care plan, all of these things that if particularly whether you're in a couple or not, there's an asymmetry of information between any household. And so there needs to be something that is what we call the roadmap to your life, not the keys to the kingdom. We don't store passwords. We tell people where everything is. And so that way we can save potentially between 200 to 300 hours of hunting for information. Well, think about how long it would take you if you didn't have a record of your bank accounts to figure out. Every time when the penny drops, we then go, it's not just for my parents, it's for me and my life. The way I try and explain it to people at dinner parties, because telling people you plan for death is a conversation killer. But what I do instead is, if I've got a couple in front of me, I ask, which one of you pays the electricity bill? And then I turn to the other one and I say, who's it with? And then I go multiply that by 300 fields that we have on the platform. And each one of those represents at least an hour, potentially months, sometimes never finding information. So yeah, that's what we do. save family hours of administrative pain.
I lived this experience back in 2020. My wife got sick. She had a brain hemorrhage and things, and basically she was paid the bills and things, and I was picked up everything and pretty much just to find out where everything was going and how it was working and things, and stacks of paperwork and things. So I've lived this experience.
And I mean, can you imagine if there'd been a list of the 10 things that you just needed to deal with?
Yeah, and then it's ongoing as well, because I mean, obviously, because I mean, she's in disability care, but basically, but the thing is that it's the ongoing stuff as well, and stuff that crops up and is misfit. I think what you've got's incredible, because what it does, it captures everything that people would want to know.
Absolutely. I mean, once you have a lived experience of this, and I used to begin the conversation by asking it, but it's quite an invasive question to answer. So thank you for sharing that. But once you have had a lived experience of this, whether it is in the case for you, your wife, or for many of us, it's our parents, you never really want to have that experience again. And it is so eminently preventable.
It is.
If you're prepared to put in the effort, and it does take effort to put in that plan in place.
So, I mean, how does it actually work? Just so an advisor actually talks to their client about what they should be doing, and from a will standpoint, what directives there are in the future and things. And I guess they'll then engage with you to get the platform.
Yeah. So we work with advisors because unless you've had the lived experience that you've had, if I just walked out into the street and said, here, have one of these, you'd probably go, that's not the most exciting thing I've ever wanted, even if you could kind of get an idea of why to do it. Advisors are in a unique position to tell people they're in a trusted role, and they can actually tell people of consequences. They are paid to tell people about consequences they hadn't considered. And so, we work with financial advisors, and we work with wills and estates lawyers, and beginning to work with family lawyers as well. And how it basically fits is that the advisor makes the client aware of the service, makes the client aware of the need for the service, and then they can set the client up. And if they do it that way, they maintain access to that client's information. Knowing when there's been something fundamental that's changed in terms of asset purchase, these are potentially good triggers for them to get back in touch and update the will.
Yes.
I mean, the figures that I've seen in the will space, well, I've been told in the will space, and I should probably get a verified source, but actually the prevalence of wills is an issue, but not as much of an issue in the over 60s, right? Like those figures are fairly good. It's the quality of wills that's the issue.
Oh yeah, you see some absolute crackers out there, like have gone to Australia Post and picked
but it's not even just the formatting of it. The real issue is the quality of the information that it was based on.
Yeah, right? True. Yeah.
So even a well-drafted, accurate post office will is fine if it's got up-to-date information.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So the actual issue isn't the format. The issue is the currency of the information and whether that information still fits the will. And that's where the quality drops.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I mean, people make changes. They get a will done. There's all these sort of changes. They might change life insurance companies. They might change a whole bunch of different things.
Might buy a house.
Yeah.
And forget, and potentially, and this is where we're getting into the family law space. If the binding financial agreement has said, well, we're not going to buy anything in joint property, but then they would go off and buy something in joint property. At least there is a visibility that whether the BFA has actually been, complied with. So that giving the lawyers that visibility and ongoing visibility, there's a real benefit to the family, because the lawyer can get back in touch if those documents need to be updated.
I feel like as well, the prevalence or the increase in digital assets as well, such as crypto, I think this is just a must have, because people have got all these wallets probably sitting everywhere and things, and money over here and money over here. And
absolutely. Time was that we could sit by the mailbox and watch someone's life quietly come through it.
Yes,
right?
True.
Okay. And that won't happen anymore. Now, yes, you can do a search through people's infinite inboxes, but good luck to you.
Yeah.
I think, we are definitely keeping an eye on the obvious AI solutions that will help us sort through that kind of levels of data. But I think, for where we are right now, the best source for people is from the people themselves.
Yep.
There's also manner and form of privacy concerns that we should be concerned with. This is a very good solution while we're sorting all of that stuff out. I think the future is definitely going to be in many of those more automated spaces, absolutely testing some of those solutions.
I can imagine so. I mean, yeah, there would be. You could look at inboxes and actually then use that to automate. Yeah,
absolutely,
and not just financial stuff, but other stuff as well.
Exactly, exactly right. So we're certainly we've got one eye on that. We have got some AI on the platform already. I mean, it's actually in quite a surprisingly human space. So one of the areas that we look at is letters of care for dependents, including children. And this is a very difficult module to fill in because you're asking a parent to imagine the child's life without them. It's very emotionally confronting.
I've been in a situation where I've actually had to sit down there and go through advanced care directives and actually look at those sort of forms and things. It's very painful to go through that sort of stuff. Like, who manages that conversation? How does that actually work?
And this is why we like working with advisors, right? Because there are certain things that advisors are, they have the human in the loop as far as that's concerned. For the letters of care for children, though, we've actually deployed an AI bot. It's called Bill, obviously, because we needed something called Bill somewhere on the platform. And because I've got some psychological training, when you tell someone to write a letter of care for a loved one, the first question they think they have to answer is, what do I want for them when I'm not here? That's a very confronting question to ask. But actually, tell me about your child and their interests and their hobbies is a very easy.
That's very smart.
Very easy way. So we start with the basics and we start with the emotionally pleasing stuff. And we go, tell them about your interests and what do they like and what are their habits and what brings them comfort and all of these things. Much easier questions. And so the bot it's quite a gated bot, but the bot eventually gets to the heavier questions. By that stage, you're 5-10 questions in. You've been sharing, you've been talking.
Imagining as well that it would actually use the existing information and then sort of suggest some responses to the other questions.
Correct. So it begins to be a much more personalized conversation than starting with a confronting question at the end. So, and then of course you just push the button and it generates a letter that you can then edit into your own voice as you wish to. Is
there a particular trend in the clients you've actually got using it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the trend that we're leaning into now, and it's amazing how it's changed in the 2 years since we launched the business. I think when we launched the business 2 years ago, I was having very thorny debates about, people over 65 and aversion to technology and so on. And now I remind people that the next 700,000 retirees coming into the market are all Gen X. And I'm generally the same generation as the person I'm sitting across the table from, which I find quite confronting. But it's a very different level of sort of tech literacy and tech trust as well. So the conversation, even in the last 2 years, has changed dramatically because there was they were picturing this as, I suppose, frankly, for 85-year-olds, some 85-year-olds, my dad would have absolutely eaten this alive. He would have loved it, but not everybody is. But when you're starting to talk to a 60, between our sort of core target market is between 40 and 60.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's about the complexity of your life. It is not about the imminence of your death. And I'm sorry to bring this up again, but you've absolutely learned that firsthand.
Oh yeah, I mean the complexity when somebody gets sick and that sort of stuff, and basically, and they can't make decisions for themselves anymore. I mean, it's just a very difficult thing to do, and you're actually got the load on your shoulders. So
absolutely,
everything you can take off that load by having stuff that's documented that you can go back to and look at and things. And you're right. I mean, everything from subscriptions to every aspect.
Everything can multiply into hours and hours of pain. And that's actually one of our key KPIs is how many hours of pain do we save families?
Well, it does. And also, removes these traumatic events as well. Like you get a bit of mail coming through that you probably just didn't want to get come through, but you got to deal with. These little shocks and surprises and things versus that removes it.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons why we try to handle closures and transfers of accounts so quickly is we know that stuff is triggering.
Yeah.
And, we are shining a little bit of a light on some of the areas where there are difficulties in the system. My vision for that's another area where obviously we'll look at automation because there's no reason why a human needs to run that stuff. But at the moment, the levels of complexity with each organization requiring its own firm, and some require to speak to the account holder and some don't and some do. And it's more complicated than it needs to be. And we look forward to pushing for a future where that isn't as easy, where it's effortless.
How does somebody start a conversation about the need for this product?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's why we go through the advice door. But I think there are two things that make our product easy. Firstly is if you have the data available. The second is the context under which the conversation is raised. In the context of a wills and estates conversation, it's a very simple conversation to say, well, we've done the will, but there's all of this other stuff in your life that the will is not designed to cover. The will is not designed to capture and cover dynamic details. That dynamic details are critical to your loved ones in the case of death or incapacity. Here is a solution that you can fill out in your own time, 5 minutes, 20 minutes a day. And in a month's time, you'll have a comprehensive plan like nothing you can imagine that will be a living record for your family in the case of death or incapacity. And it's death or incapacity. So we break the rules a little bit. We're not a testamentary document, as it were. In the financial advice space, it's actually a very different conversation. For them, it is about legacy. And that is an increasing conversation that they wish to be having. There's a lot of gaps within the two worlds in terms of legacy planning, and it's a critical issue for financial advisors. Particularly, great wealth transfer, it's a blah blah. We all know that, but actually, advisors, what we offer financial advisors is a branded service that they can offer in the legacy space that can then begin to interrogate if there are other financial structures that should be put in place. Take, for example, even like a financial structure like an education bond. That's not something that the typical estate lawyer is necessarily going to ask out of the box, nor can they prescribe the solution because that's not their license. The financial advisor, as a standalone, that's quite a narrow conversation, but it's actually a very popular product, particularly with estate contestations up on the rise, with willingness for some money to skip a generation, be left to a grandchild for educational purposes, the certainty that that provides, and so on. So we're helping to we're finding all of these gaps in legacy planning that's really, really matter to people, that we're able to, because we sort of sit in between these worlds.
I mean, I'm just thinking to myself, like in a situation whereby somebody becomes incapacitated or they've had some sort of major illness, which means they can't take care of themselves anymore. I mean, this is just gold, because when they don't have other relatives to take care of them or whatever else, this is the directive of the document that sort of says, this is how I actually run my life.
This is how I run my life, absolutely. And I mean, I think the thing that I try to really impress upon people is these things are unexpected. No one buys a life insurance policy because they think they're going to die tomorrow.
That's right.
We operate on a similar kind of fashion in that it's insurance against a lot of pain. And a lot of administration, a lot of heartache. We are operating in a very sort of similar domain. The key thing I try to say to people is, it's not just about death. If something were to happen to you suddenly, or if you were to receive a diagnosis, I know how I'd like to spend my last 6 months on the planet, and it's not pulling this shit together. I would want the peace of mind that we actually offer. That's what we really offer.
Well, it is. I mean, I think to myself, like if somebody's incapacitated, I mean, the thing you want to know is the guardian that's actually taking care of you is actually following like a life plan or a life directive.
Absolutely. And that also that you're not putting unnecessary burden. It is a burden no matter what you do,
right.
But there is a way in which you can limit that burden, both for them, but also for your interests.
Well, exactly right. You've got guiding principles to actually work with.
Exactly right. It's not just about, none of us like to leave a burden on other people, but also without that information, how are they going to look after you?
Well, that's exactly right. They're right. No.
So, if you want to be selfish about it, you can do that too. That's fine. I don't mind whatever motivation gets people over the line.
No, but I totally see it. I totally see the need for it. No, brilliant conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Brilliant.
Cheers.